This is TWiT.
Let's talk about Uber.
Oh,
Hi.
let's talk about Uber.
I don't know where to begin.
Let's talk about an Uber scandal for a change.
Yeah, what?
It's Tuesday. There must be three or four to choose
What
from.
a shock. So this is Sunday's New York Times. Big piece. Uber's CEO plays with fire. But the funny thing is, you know, it's all about, it says, Travis Kalanick's drive to win in life has led to a pattern of risk-taking that has times put his ride-hailing company on the brink of implosion. But they really kind of buried the lead. Well, actually, it is the lead, so I guess.
There's two leads. That's the problem, is that there's two scandals in one story.
In one story, and it's not even the point of the story.
Package.
Yeah.
So we'll start with number one. And by the way, John Gruber gets all the credit in the world for parsing this, because it's not immediately clear if you read the Times piece what's going on. For months, Kalanick had pulled a fast one on Apple by directing his employees to camouflage the ride-hailing app. Now, hold that for later, because we're gonna talk about how they camouflaged it from Apple's engineers. The reason, so Apple would not find out that Uber had been secretly identifying and tagging iPhones. They changed that because in the original copy it said tracking, even after its app had been deleted and the devices erased, a fraud detection maneuver that violated Apple's privacy guidelines. Now, that's all they say, really, and I think John gets a lot of credit for, and some others, for figuring it out. They go on to say Apple was on to the deception. Tim Cook says when Kalanick comes in to meet with him in his bright red sneakers and hot pink socks, so I've heard you, not Cook, Kalanick, by the way. I don't think Cook wears
No.
bright red
Tasteful blue shirt.
So I should do Mr. Cook in a fine Auburn accent. So I heard you have been breaking some of our rules. Stop the trickery, Mr. Cook demanded, or Uber's app will be kicked out of the App Store. And of course, you know, Kalanick promised, I will stop the trickery. But what was not clear in here is what the hell the trickery was.
So before you get to that, Leo, my favorite part is that they camouflaged it, but Apple has more than one office, and a company whose entire business is based upon location didn't realize that Apple had more than one office, and anybody outside the main office would just detect this normally.
So the way they camouflaged it is they would check in the app if they were near Cupertino, and then they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
The theory being that the app would get approved by somebody.
Sunnyvale, they get caught.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cut to John Gruber's post from that day. He says, secretly identifying and tagging iPhones even if after its app has been deleted is a rather startling accusation, because it sounds like it should be technically impossible. It's also unclear what information Uber was able to glean. He then reads between the lines and also comes up with, I think, an exactly right story, which is the Uber app, while installed, uses forbidden or even secret APIs to get the app's unique ID, right? It's UDID.
I think it says just a little bit below, he links to Will Straff at Chronic, who flagged it with
Chronic figured it out, yeah.
Yeah. It uses I/O, one of the frameworks, to basically bombard it with symbols. And
private APIs using IOKit to pull the device serial number from the device registry. So you install the Uber app, and among other things it sends back to the home office is your phone's serial number. Why did they want that? Well, again, this is more digging. The Times kind of fumbled this. They didn't know what the important story was, I think, because they weren't technical, or Mike Isaac, who wrote it, wasn't technical enough to understand it. Wait a minute. What the hell? So it turns out that Uber had a fraud problem, particularly in India. Drivers were being rewarded for the number of rides they accepted. They were getting bonused. Drivers are not dumb. They went out and bought a lot of old iPhones, put the app on it, requested rides from themselves, and accepted it. Boom, 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 boom. Uber, of course, caught on and said, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to keep track of the serial numbers of phones that install the Uber app and make sure, you know, that this doesn't happen. Prevent the fraud. The problem is, in order to do that, you have to break Apple's rules. Now, I don't blame Uber for wanting to do this. The question is well, yeah, you know, they could have gotten banned from the App Store, which would have been huge. On the other hand, notice Tim Cook didn't do anything but say, now knock that off. So obviously Apple wants Uber in the App Store as much as Uber wants to be in the App Store. So Apple kind of overlooked this violation. And it's a reasonable thing for Uber to want to do. The question is, did they use it in other ways to spy on customers?
Well, they were already. Again, it's like that's why I'm saying, isn't it interesting that I can't imagine a bad story about Uber. They're already doing things like tracking who in certain major cities, including Boston, are government regulators that are trying to see if Uber is doing anything illegal with their apps, and therefore if I'm a regulator in Boston and I hail an Uber because I want to see like how is the app working.
That was another one, wasn't it?
Taking it. Yeah. Right. That it will actually it's identified me somewhere in a database and refuses to.
Was that
like
gray?
Cancel
they called it gray
booking.
ball, I think, something like that. Yeah.
And
that's
so even, they're very yeah. And there are a couple others we could talk about, but it's like they're clearly playing at a certain when I say not comic book supervillain level, but let's say the 1960s Batman TV show supervillain level.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Also, we know they had this God mode that would see all Uber rides going on, and if, for instance, they said
Lyft rides,
hey, I happen to know what President Trump's Uber phone is. We could tell you where Trump is at any time, right? I guess they'd know that anyway from the account information.
It reminds me of that line, though, where they said that no amount of law enforcement manpower or financing is equal to the criminals being stupid. It's just like they do this thing, and you can understand their frustration with the fraud, but there are other ways, and I believe they're doing those ways now that don't violate the rules. But back then, it was just, what's an expedient way to get this information? The rules be damned. They acted first and thought second, which is a dangerous trait in a company that has this much responsibility on their service.
John Gruber says that Will Strafak said that this was in the 2014 build of Uber's iOS app, and it no longer works in iOS 10. So Apple clearly changed these API calls, these private API calls, to break this. But Gruber also points out, or asks, I think a really good question, why didn't Apple require Uber to tell its customers what they'd been doing as a condition for remaining in the store? Shouldn't Apple have said, hey, you got to, you have really violated the privacy of our customers. You need to tell them if you want to stay in the store. Why didn't they do that?